So the talk is going to be about this game that we did called Bloodhunt, and how we work with outsourcing and how we work with codev. Gonna start a little bit about myself. So I'm the studio art director for Sharkmob. I started way back during the VIC-20 and Commodore 64 days, when you had to actually code to do any kind of art. Over time, then I moved on to the Amiga, so you have an actual graphical display to do something. And this led me to become part of the game developer scene in Sweden. And I've been there working on games since '98, so it's 25 years. It's horrible. And I worked in some really cool games. And I actually been doing everything, like everything from animation to 2D to 3D to leadership, and then the later games from Division and Hitman, I was brand art director. And me and a few colleagues started this company, Sharkmob, and our first game was Bloodhunt. So we built the company around this game. And it's based on Vampire the Masquerade, which is an IP owned by Paradox, about vampires interacting in the real world. And we wanted to do a multiplayer version of this. So the way to make this game is that we knew that we were just starting the company. We were 5 guys. We're going to be like 18 people in the beginning. So we needed outsourcing to do everything. So the goal was to do premium graphics, and it was supposed to be free to play. So it's not that easy to do. So the mission statement is to create the most realistic and detailed graphics in any battle royale game. It set us a lot of problems saying this. So we had to do a lot of things like smart production. Like we needed to hit high quality content. We were a small team. We needed fast production and fast iterations because of the live service side of things. Of course, keeping the cost down. So we didn't have a lot of money to start with. So the budget was a little bit tight. And we needed things to be repeatable. So whatever we did, we needed to go back and be able to do many of whatever we did, swords or pants. So we had a few phases that I'm going to talk about, like the pre-production, the production, and live phase. And in all of those phases, we used outsourcing. First to find the style of the game, then to build a ramp-up production, and then go into like how are we going to sustain the live phase of the game. So in pre-production, what you need to do is like, especially for art, is like you need to define the art direction. And I was alone. I had like no artist, no nothing. So we were thinking of like, how are we gonna start doing this whole huge work alone? So we started looking at the vendors to help us with this. So the important part here was to try to find somebody that would understand IP creation, and it's not very common. Like most vendors are more about like, okay, I need a list and I'll start doing things. So it's more about like how can we take this IP and make a game out of it? So the first thing we started was a style guide. We also worked on some of the key visuals. And what we did here is like trying to define key moments of the game in just a few visuals, and then from there, start working on the game. Then we had a CGI, and normally you do a CGI when you announce the game. We did it the other way around. We did the CGI, like some of the first things we did, because we wanted to force ourselves. So like we needed environments, we needed characters, we needed the lighting and the color grading and the effects. So a lot of things that we need to do very quickly. So we used these two companies, Mood Visuals in Copenhagen and Platish Image in Poland, Warsaw. And I've worked with them before when I was during the Ubisoft days. So this was great. Like I knew them already, and we can work on defining the look of the game. So the first thing that happened is that we started working on the pillars, the art direction pillars. They helped me to do the mood boards, like the tone of voice, finding the brand colors, all the factions, like the different vampire factions, like their colors, so a lot of this kind of thing that normally I would have to do myself and would take forever, they helped me with. So very quickly, in a matter of weeks, I had the whole style guide ready. From there, we did the key visuals. So these are like key moments in the game. The feeding, of course, like you're a normal person, and then you're like this very powerful being feeding on humans. We also wanted a lot of traversal in the game. It's based on a real city, Prague in the Czech Republic. So very beautiful buildings, a lot of verticality, and this image basically captures that. And we also had like a social hub where you would be all the vampires there, and you would see a lot of the customization. And then, of course, there would be a lot of combat, a lot of visceral combat, everything from melee to range to vampiric abilities. So from here, we started directing ourselves to the CGI. So like, okay, we need characters, we need the environments, we need all of this. So we started doing a lot of pre-production. And I worked with Tomek Baginski, which is an Academy Award-winning director at Platish. And I wanted to work with him during Division, but for some reason we found Blur instead to do our CGI. But I always wanted to work with him. He had like a really cool idea of like how to do a very cheap CGI with few scenes, but still would capture the feeling of the game. And I'm gonna show you it. The good thing about doing something like this early on is that, like I said before, it forces you to take a lot of decisions. It also gave us a lot of money because coming with an asset like this to publishers or investors helped a lot. So I'm going to show you a video of like kind of like the early days of game development. Like, yeah, we're working on Unreal, we're doing photogrammetry. We're kind of like setting the stage of what we wanted to produce. So at this stage, it was only about these two vendors that we started before ramping up the production. But we wanted to kind of like see what the game would be. We went to Prague, did a lot of reference imagery. At this time also like finding the characters, the entity, which is like the main enemy of the game. Yeah, I love this stage of production, like the early days when you're like trying to define something and you're like you're pushing the envelope of what you can do. And also since we were very few, we were very limited on a lot of things. Like for example, here we're doing mocap with the XN suit instead of having a proper mocap studio. And this is basically the art team. That was it. We worked a lot on like systems to make buildings quickly, so we could populate the city quickly. And a lot of the battle royales were usually islands, some sort of island, some sort of terrain where there are props. Here is a city, so it's like every street is super packed and detailed. So yeah, a lot of work on this. I'm gonna skip this. Okay. So the production phase is about taking those ideas that we had in the beginning and then building the pipelines for art creation. We of course had to create a lot of benchmark assets, like how are the characters, what's the weapons, how do we do customization, etc. And then of course finding the partners so we can start building and ramping up production. So a lot of the things we had to do is like, for example, to create systems so that we could do a lot of content. Like, for example, the character system was made in a way where we could easily swap things, or the environments. Like, for example, we could build a lot of content with just having small pieces repeatable. And I'll show you some example of this. I'm going to call out one of the vendors that we used here. It was Ulysses Graphics that we had a lot of good collaborations with, and I can show you a little bit later like how we use this vendor. So like I said before, we had a lot of restrictions in how to build things. It's like super detailed environments, and there's no terrain. It's just like buildings everywhere. So we had to come up with ways of doing all of this variety relatively simple. Of course, there's a lot of like statues in the city. So the first system was this. So we started in a blueprint in Unreal. We created basically a system where we could do any kind of building easy. And the outsourcing part was that we would take each part, each window, for example, or entrance, and we could outsource those things. And then we could, over time, build more and more variety to the city. So in the beginning, we had maybe like 5 different versions. And here you see kind of like us trying out to build a block out of a city block, and kind of like how easy it would be. And the good thing is here is also like this system would scale over time. So like when you started doing more presets, we could start adding and creating more variety. And basically the bulk of the city is built this way. Of course, I said before, we use a lot of photogrammetry. There was statues. So what we did is like we found a person that lives in Prague and who would take photos for us. We would point him in Google Maps. He would take the photos. Then we would take this and we would send it to a vendor in China to make it game ready. And yeah, we did also a few trips there with the team. It's just like huge amounts of statues. We did weird things like this thing. Like we had a slaughterhouse, so we had sent our photogrammetry guy to the slaughterhouse to scan dead pigs. He became a vegetarian after this. And then this is the cool thing, I think, working with Ulysses is like we always wanted to have a better relationship with the vendor. So we actually went to Kiev, met the team, met all the leads, and we didn't just send the outsourcing managers. So I went there, or a CFO went there, and we're like, we want to have a different type of relationship. So it's not just like sending lists. It's about like they are making half of our game. They need to understand the project. So I spent time and I did a several-hour presentation of the game so that the team would understand what they're building. We also have them come to Malmo. So here is in our, after a while, we have an actual mocap studio. So they came to Malmo and we introduced them to the team. So the people that are working with them, they're not just a name. This is a person and they know them. They talked to them. They went for dinner. So a lot of things work really well here because of that. And these are some of the examples of the work they did. They did hair, for example, and weapons and all kinds of things for the game. And really high quality. And again, like they really had understood the process. I think that was important, that it's the outsourcing business is a people business. It's a communication business. And I had to work a lot with the internal team to make them understand that if we want to make this type of game, we need to work with them. So the last part of the phase, of course, is like nearing end of production. So we need to ramp up so that when we start releasing the game, we need to continue pumping out assets and content. So here we started looking at finding a larger partner to use synergies. We also were ramping up for marketing. So we need to find trailer agencies and key art agencies, etc. Of course, more testing, like you can't have a game not working. So Keywords became our main partner, and they have like all of these studios. So we were very lucky that whenever we had a problem, we talked to Paul, and then it's like, oh yeah, we have this team that can do this. So okay, we need that, and they would guide us to do a lot of things. And one of the teams that we worked a lot with I think was very successful was the co-development with D3T. And it's something that, again, it's like you're gonna have people working on your game. They can't be just like other people or different. So we integrate them into Slack. They were able to come to Malmo and spend time with the team. We even have game jams that they were part of. And there were two teams. One is like the team extension. So we had a lot of systems in the game, and like, okay, those systems goes to them, and they're like multidisciplinary. But they also work on the AI, the bots of the game, and they did a really good job, like very successful work. And I think the most important part is that they felt like they were part of the team. They didn't feel like they were this other team. They felt like they were part of the Bloodhunt team. So they were adding extra time or extra love and extra whatever they were doing to make the game better. So I think that was like super important, that it's not just like another studio, but they were like also making the game with us. So one of the learnings that we had is that I think and this is more on our end, that we weren't really ready to have an external team. So we had directors, but they were spending all the time, 95% of the time in the internal team. But then there is like 30% happening outside. So one of the things looking to the future is that we will have to spend much more time interacting with these partners, especially in the direction side of things. So it's not only the art director, but all the directors understand that there is like huge parts of the game happening outside. These are some examples of like the environments that we got working with all of these vendors. A lot of detail and a lot of variety in environments. Also some of the character fidelity and a lot of variety of characters. And these were made by so many different studios. Like I think like 80% or 90% of all the content was made externally. But it's still, everything keeps like a similar consistency. Let's see. So we had 3 big problems in the production, challenges, I think it's better to call it. Let's see, so I'm speeding through the presentation. The first one was the pipeline. I said that we're doing a free-to-play game, but in reality, we started as a more premium type of project, later changed to free-to-play. But the pipeline of making characters didn't change. So we had like a very classical pipeline to make content that worked on a more premium project. But when you're doing free-to-play, you need to just pump out content constantly, and it's like a never-ending. And it's something that we figure out too late. Like we're just going to launch the game, and it's like, okay, the pipeline is not scaling. Like, for example, if you do an outfit, since we had different types of vampires, you had to hand fix every outfit for all the vampires, male and female bodies, different types. So we had, like, in the middle of launch, we had to redo the whole pipeline. So we would do a system where we do one outfit, and then it would scale to all the versioning. But it took us a long time, and that was like one of the major challenges. Luckily, again, we had outsourcing to help us to redo a lot of the content, have it ready for launch. The second big thing that we had, and this is an image I found in Google 30 minutes ago, it's like we like I was saying again, like I had the example of Ulysses where it worked well. We also had other vendors that we spent so much time building relationships. So the dream is that you would have like an end-to-end partner that would do everything from the creative all the way to game ready asset. So for the characters, we found a vendor that I'm not gonna name that could do everything from concept art. They would understand the project. We would spend time with them, and then they would do all the steps. And we did a few tests, and we had everything ready for launch. And then all of a sudden they stopped answering our calls, and then of course they were acquired by a publisher. So that was like a big problem because we spent a lot of time building up all of this relationship. They were ready to go and then gone. So we found another partner, which was Ulysses, which is fantastic. We went to Kiev. It's all perfect. We're ready for launch. Okay, we're delayed a little bit, but we have this. And then this happened. So that was also very problematic because it's like since we had this way of thinking, like we really want to make a personal connection. It's not like we don't just want lists. We want the team to be part of it. We spend a lot of time building up these relationships. But then, like, yeah, we were hit by 2 major setbacks. Luckily, they were able to reorganize. We also helped some of their staff move to Malmo. So during the war, we also continue paying them, even though they weren't delivering anything, so they would survive as a company. And they managed to fix so that they were working throughout Eastern Europe and even Ukraine. And then now everybody's, I think, back in Kiev. So at the end, it turned out well, but it was a real challenge, especially when you're focusing too much on one vendor. It becomes very problematic. It's like it's what you want because you want to have the personal relationship, and something that we really strive for. But it was difficult. So learnings is like that find the correct partner for each phase. Not all partners are good for all phases. Like, for example, we've done in pre-production, we brought in a partner that was more a production partner, and they struggle a lot because in pre-production you're changing your mind, you're changing ideas, and like, okay, no, we're gonna do it this way or that way, and they can't work very well that way, and there's a lot of frustration on both sides. But there's some certain partners, like for example Mood or Platish, like they were perfect for that phase when we're like, we don't know actually how the characters are gonna look. We think we know, but it's a little bit like this, and no, change that. So yeah. And then of course, this is the other mistake that we did. Of course, who would have known there would be war in Europe again? But this is something we learned, that we can't put all our eggs in one basket. We tried it 2 times and we were burned both times. So that's why we always try to diversify. So we have the same things like hair. We have 3 studios that can do hair. We have 3 studios that can do weapons. We have so just because of this, like this was a big learning for us coming from development. Then the last one is, of course, the pipeline needs to be ready for a live phase. Like we were very naive there. It's like, yeah, it's like we can figure it out. And then just when we're gonna launch, we're like, okay, we cannot go live with this pipeline. So where we're launching the game, where we're doing the pipeline, and that's not a good idea. So even though it takes time and it might cost you a little, it's just better to do it before. So that was the presentation. Hopefully you learned something, or at least like from all the conversation I'm having, I get the feeling that we're all in very similar situations. And also like your talk about before with the geopolitical things, who would have thought that would be a thing, that geopolitics would affect the work that we do, and now even now we need to find ways of like working around it. Yeah, thank you.